Welcome to Thursday Night Talk. This is a show where we discuss the week in Humboldt, the local issues with the local personalities. I'm Talvi Fried, and I'll be your local host for the next hour. Since July of 2022, Centro Del Pueblo's El Jardín Sanctuary Garden has been repeatedly vandalized. Its signs defaced, its crops cut down, cameras stolen, and gates locked, all in what the Arcata City Council has proclaimed a sanctuary city. Who is doing these crimes? Why are the Arcata police seemingly unable to stop these repeated actions of vandalism? What is the effect of anti-immigrant hate crimes on Centro Del Pueblo as an organization and on its members? What is the history of anti-immigrant actions on the North Coast? And what message, either intentionally or unintentionally, are the perpetrators of these crimes attempting to convey? You haven't guessed, we're talking, I guess, anti-immigration actions that have been taken today in our local community. And joining us tonight, we have the CEO of Centro Del Pueblo, Brenda Perez, Dr. Aaron Donaldson, lecturer in forensics, rhetorical theory and criticism, neuro-rhetorics, ethics, mass media, argumentation, and nonviolence, and host of two KZZH shows, the Civic Union and the Dirt Map series of media explorations. And hopefully we have Jean Filzer, author of the recent book, Driven Out the Forgotten War Against Chinese Americans, if she can get her internet connection together. So hello, Brenda. Hello, Aaron.
Hi, hello, everybody. Hello, the KCZH audience.
Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. I wish we had a happier topic to discuss, though it is somewhat disturbing what has been going on, particularly in Arcata, which, well, I will ask this question. Aaron, I think you know the history very well of Arcata becoming a sanctuary city and what that means for any city that's a sanctuary city. I think we need to, some listeners may not understand completely what it all is. So Aaron, how about you give a quick rundown of what is a sanctuary city? What does that mean for the city to be that? And what is going on at this particular community garden?
Well, I'll probably pass it to Brenda to give us the lowdown on what's going on there at the sanctuary. I think that, you know, just from my understanding of what makes a sanctuary city is that we've got, you know, commitments to an understanding that we live in a climate that is fraught with explicit and implicit white supremacist rhetoric. It's anti-immigrant, but it's also anti-indigenous. It's anti-Black, it's anti-trans, it's homophobic. There is a legacy of this discourse, and part of being a sanctuary city is owning that, admitting that that is part of the community that we inhabit, and acknowledging that that exists and trying not to erase it. As Brenda Perez said to the city council, treat it like a actual genuine public health crisis, because it is, and do more than say sorry. A sanctuary city is one that says that we are welcome to people of you know, pretty much all perspectives and all orientations, but more than that, hopefully it means that we will be proactive. And I feel like we're failing in a lot of ways in that capacity. And there, I think Brenda could probably really elaborate.
Yeah, thank you. So the meaning of being a sanctuary city, it's not only having a law or statement. The meaning is to practice it, to become a sanctuary space, is to respect every person on it, to make sure everything is it's up to, so that people that comes, especially immigrants, feel welcome into a space. And I really believe the city is failing on it. It's the first city in the entire county to declare itself a sanctuary. And with that background, since 2017, they haven't really done enough for us immigrants to feel welcome or safe even. So it's a challenge for them. And I don't think we're supposed to be the ones, Centro del Pueblo or the immigrants, to enforce that statement. Those are the ones in place to enforce. That's the local government, the people in charge of doing planning, doing so many things. So the meaning is really to practice it, practice sanctuary.
So I wanted to ask Brenda for my sake, because I've heard of Centro Del Pueblo, there's a program on KZZH that discusses it quite often. Though for those who are tuning in who may not have familiarity with it, what is Centro Del Pueblo? Its mission statement and what it does for the community.
Yeah, Centro del Pueblo became a nonprofit last year, but we are a grassroots movement and organization, a community-based organization. We started in 2016 when the presidency of Donald Trump was setting a lot of challenges and anti-immigrant rhetoric. So for us was key, was a matter of saving our own lives and our families to being together to start organizing. And for us, the sanctuary laws was the best tool, strategy to bring up the topic to every table's families conversation, but also for the local government to do something about what was happening. The border and all the inhuman things that happen not only has there down south. We can see so many examples of how racism hurts the immigrant population in Humboldt County. So Centro is that. Our statement is to empower the Latinx, indigenous from the South in Humboldt County, in Wheatland.
And what has been going on with the garden? Because I feel like this has been a year-long thing. It was like over a dozen times there has been vandalism or actual complete destruction of property on this. So what is the garden and what has happened there?
The garden is a project that we started during the pandemic, not only because we have phone calls from people that has food that is scarce, there is a scarcity, it's real, but also because the quality of the food for our community it's lacking. We need more of our plants that we can eat. So we started this project in collaboration with the Arcata Presbyterian Church and also the Cooperation Humboldt organization. And we have a very successful beginning. A lot of community members came. We should remember what is to be in the pandemic, isolated in a very small house and being a large family. So for us, the garden was that open space where we can even play to take out our masks for some minutes and to breathe in the fresh air. So that was the garden for the first year until the vandalism started. And then the families started to be afraid and don't come back again. So that started in July 2022. During the visit of Congressman Woods, I remember he came to Humboldt and he stops in the garden and we saw the welcome sign with him, next to him, with the press there. So we didn't know how to react. We felt threatened and we felt that we couldn't enter a space that we have curated for us and for the families to come. So it was a heartbreak. It was, and it's still a heartbreaking memory. And it's active because the person that is committing all these hate crimes is out there. And unfortunately, it's not an only person feeling or sentiment in the county.
I feel the history of Humboldt County does not, it does not always look good. And this goes farther back than July 2022. There's been, I mean, you have, Indian Island back in the day, which was obviously they slaughtered, somebody went out there and slaughtered everyone. We don't need to go into the history of that, maybe a different show. Because I feel like everybody's heard this story again and again, and as a warning of like, don't be that terrible of a monster of a human being, and that is part of the history of Humboldt County. There's also the push for Chinese Americans to move out of here, and it wasn't just Chinese Americans, it was anybody who looked like they could be Asian was discriminated against in Humboldt County. And it was absolutely horrendous. There's anti-Semitic views that have gone on forever. I feel like, I mean, like at the bar, I still remember this it was a couple of years ago, but still that it was a couple of years ago, and somebody was literally denying the Holocaust and being like, well, who would actually be Jew? You know, and it's just, it's surprising to me that these sentiments are happening. Though I wanted to ask Erin, like, how can we tell what trends are happening, and should people be scared right now? Because history has always shown that if one group is targeted, you're going to be next. If the group targeting other groups gains power, there's no stopping them from suddenly deciding, well, this group is terrible, but now this one is too, because they're, even if they look similar to me, they're of a different religion or of a different, you know, they have a different accent. It's just people who target others always want to create the other. And a brief history of that in Humboldt County, and what trends could potentially be occurring right now would be helpful. So, Erin.
Yeah, I think we see a couple of trends. I'll broadly characterize them as threefold. The first I would call the kind of just general historical trend of white supremacy here. And in this capacity, Humboldt is not very remarkable. The settler colonial empire was written by the logic of a Judeo-Christian white supremacist nation that had very little room for anyone else to be counted as even civil, let alone a citizen. Like, we were civilizing the places that we were going. And that is a horrendous vocabulary for what was actually going on, which we now know to be genocide. And I think that the first trend is one that wants to maintain that the United States of America is supposed to be a white supremacist state, a Judeo-Christian state. This is something that we don't like to talk about. We will ignore it. We will deny it. We'll say it's a few people, or it's the way we used to be. But the South will rise again is a promise, is something that I say quite a bit. And the Civil War, I don't think was ever won. I think it became an insurgency. And in that regard, we have one trend in the Pacific Northwest, especially, of a lot of very Confederate sympathizing people. The second trend that we have is the trend towards progressivism. And this is the one that I think is leading to the blowback that we see now. Donald Trump and his followers frame themselves as victims. And that is because they're being called out. And more we are getting better at describing what is going on, at naming this kind of behavior, and at adopting policies like sanctuary cities, and giving platforms, and hopefully doing better to listen to folks that say that we're not doing enough. And that's the kind of progressive trend. The third trend is the kind of apologetic trend that I see. When I was researching for this tonight, I just looked at the local media, and Mad River Union is the only outlet that is characterizing these as attacks. The North Coast Journal calls it vandalism. The Times Standard calls it vandalism. JPR calls it vandalism. Redhead Black Belt, who I really like, calls it vandalism. And yes, technically we could call it vandalism, but they're being investigated as hate crimes. And if I see some kind of a sexual object drawn on a piece of concrete, that's a kind of vandalism. But if I see a Confederate flag drawn on a piece of concrete, intentional or not, that's a symbol with history, and it is a threatening one. It is a history that says that we are threatening you, and that's what we're seeing here. So should we be afraid? I think I fear for my neighbors, because I believe this legacy, and I believe that this is real. Whether or not these folks will come for me, one thing we know is they don't like us talking about it. This is not something that they want to be out in the open. But I can't pretend to have the same kind of exposure that my neighbors have in this capacity. But I'm fearful. I'm very fearful, because I think that when people lock up gardens and cut down corn and write, USA America, that this is all a kind of dog whistling, and we can prove that. And that dog whistling comes with a malicious intent.
yeah, I do want to repeat a little bit of what you just said, which it's not just writing things on walls. I mean, it is that too. It's writing weird, like USA and Trump on their signs, and I'm just like, it's just very baffling to me how just the IQ level of whoever's doing that is just in question in my mind, because at least be creative here, at least like, and get some better like handwriting or something. I don't know. Though the chopping down of crops, which is something that benefits not just, it benefits everybody. The more food and sustenance given to people in this county, the healthier they can be. And hopefully, the more nutrition given to a child growing up, the higher their IQ is over time. And the less likely they're going to be to write really weird stuff on walls, I hope. Though, Brenda, I wanted to ask what other trends have you seen in the community? Because I feel like if something like this is happening again and again in a repeated form over a dozen times at one particular location, are there other instances that you have experienced while living out here that you feel could be either seen as threatening or just ignorant?
Yeah, I refuse it too. It's beyond that. It has an intention, and the fact that it's minimized as ignorance. I don't think it honors the complexity of what we are talking about. I think based on my experience in this county, we can really need to put an alert out there. We need to say that Humboldt County is in a crisis of racism, and racism is a problem of health, like public health. So deny it or minimize it is really irresponsible. I think it's trying to cover for something else, and it says a lot about the people in charge. So what you were asking about the trends or the experiences, not only mine, but from my entire community, it's horrendous. I know for more people that listen, the 12 consecutive hate crimes of the Sanctuary Garden feel very sad and bad, but for us, it's a threat. It's directly over our bodies. I feel that if I go with my brown skin to the garden, I might be targeted. I am targeted, and my daughter in my community. So based on my experience during the Sanctuary County, for example, even including physical violence was happening, especially in Ferndale, people just push us over when we were trying to gather signatures for putting the ordinance in the ballot, denying, canceling us, yelling at us, you are not legal, or you are not even citizens, why is that you are participating in a process like this? Trying to make us feel like we don't even know how to read, that we were manipulated by somebody else because we were asking protection for our rights. So it seems like us as brown bodies, we don't know what are we doing. They are trying to make us feel like children, right? Like we don't know anything from the world, and we need white people to tell us what to do with our lives, kind of thing. So this type of violence from the very top to the physical violence was very evident.
That sounds absolutely terrifying. We're going to take a break real quick, and then when we come back, I would like to discuss just the topic of ignorance as being apologetic, as well as terms and factors of, I mean, the language that we use is very important, and I have never heard that ignorance is considered apologetic. So I'd love to go more into that because how fascinating. We'll be right back. You're listening to Thursday Night Talk. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Thursday Night Talk. I'm Talvi Freed, your local host. I'm here with Brenda Perez, Centro Del Pueblo CEO, as well as Dr. Aaron Donaldson, communications lecturer at Cal Poly, as well as a whole slew of other credentials, but we can go to that at the end because we are discussing anti-immigrant thoughts, actions, and crimes in Humboldt County, particularly what has happened to Centro Del Pueblo's sanctuary garden in Arcata. And I wanted to discuss before the break, I was informed of that ignorance is often seen as apologetic, because I use the term when asking Brenda, paraphrasing, but like, how do you feel about these ignorant actions? And it turns out that perhaps I am not fully aware of the modern definition of ignorant. Things change and words do have power. So why is ignorance no longer the term to use? My theory here, hearing that, is like, oh, that makes sense, because a volatile, violent action that is directed is pretty well thought out. You have to think, like, I'm going to take this spray can to this garden and deface property. That is a pre-planned action. Though if either of you want to help me wrap my head further around this, I'd love that.
Absolutely. I was the one that described it as a studied apologetic. So as a communication studies professor, there's lots of ways that we study communication. And when it comes to the ways that we communicate about racism, this research now is decades and decades old. And as early as the 1990s, we learned that when we just try to have a conversation about whiteness, let's just, like, literally the question is, a white professor asks you, what does it mean to be white? If you are a white person, there are 6 ways that you will avoid this conversation. This was a study conducted by Nakayama and Kryzek back in the 90s. It's been replicated some 2,000 times, which is pretty robust as far as research is concerned. And I tell people, if you don't like this research, 1, you are in the research, and 2, just disprove it. If you can disprove Nakayama and Kryzek, you can work at Berkeley. Like, that would be huge if you could do that. But what we find instead is that generationally now, decades and decades and decades of trying to get folks to talk about white supremacy, white privilege, the histories and legacies of cis, settler, hetero patriarchy in this country, we dodge. We dodge. We will not talk about it. We will avoid this conversation every way possible. And that's the strategy, the tactic. How do we dodge? Well, frequently we get mad, or we get really sad. White women will cry a lot. White men will get angry a lot. People will say, don't play the race card, don't play games. But another way that we will pass the buck is we will describe white supremacy as a kind of ignorance. And I think that if we're trying to be pejorative, that's understandable. But I absolutely want to echo what we've heard, from Brenda, which is that, like, this is motivated, this is intentional, this is targeted, this is historic. This is a group of people that it's not like they just woke up today and decided this is who they're going to be. This is taught behavior, and this is learned behavior. And we're all responsible for our own education. And so when people are like, well, how am I supposed to know, or who's supposed to teach me, as an educator, I'm like, the books I have are decades old now. And it really is up to the community to one, realize that we're failing, and this is something that I do every day, is realize that I'm failing in my efforts here to account for my privilege, and then 2, to recommit to doing that homework, to trusting the research, to trusting the voices of the people that don't need a PhD to say this is motivated and historic and targeted. It's like, we see it all the time. And by making it a question of ignorance, we kind of pass the buck to, like, the education system and all of this other stuff. Either people are willfully determining that these folks don't belong, or they are refusing an education that intersectional feminists have been literally begging them to learn for a very long time now. And in either case, I would say calling it mere ignorance is a kind of passing of the buck. And it's one that I have only recently learned myself, just to to be accountable. Like I'm catching up too. Like this research is not new, but getting it into the hegemonic mainframe, that took a long time.
There's a statement I hear very often, particularly in the LGBTQ community, and that the phrase is, "It's not my job to educate you." And I do wonder how then are people going to, like, how do you combat this line of thinking? Because this is generations old. Again, this is being passed down from somewhere. And maybe it is partially some of the school systems in the area. Maybe it's they went down the wrong Twitter feed one day and now they're stuck there. Though, how does one combat this if, like, whose job is it? And it's obviously the job on the person, but if that person is being a derelict and abusing others, how do you reform them? Brenda?
That's a super interesting question and opening a debate. I'm thinking how interesting it is to be living in an open source and media, so much information out there. But it seems like for Humboldt County, there is this resistance to look out there, to keep accountable. There should be this responsibility. I think it's a moral thing if you reflect on that. And I think it's about the country, the entire United States is kind of questioning their identity in terms of who we are. So when you start seeing more and more news that immigrants are coming, that brown people is coming, then there is this confusion, I believe, in people about what is right and what is wrong. It's an open debate. It's really interesting. I think, non-profits, we cannot educate people. We can empower ourselves and with our own example, show what this county should be, can be, could be, with more people joining our efforts. But it's up to people to really distinguish on what is being in play at these times in this country. If they're discussing this identity, I think they should go further and being really self-critic from the roots. Look at history, right?
If I could follow up on that, I think that it is a very important question. And the reason folks say it's not my job to educate you is because it isn't. Technically, as an educator, as someone whose job it technically is to educate people, I tell my students I'm only half the job here. The student has to do the other half of the work. And that's a twofold job. And if that student doesn't show up, they cannot be educated. It's not something that happens by magic. Students have to put in the effort. They have to decide that they're going to believe the research. And here we have a huge problem. We have people, thankfully not yet in California, but across this country, people trying to ban the research known as critical race theory. They're trying to prohibit us from teaching this. So whose job is it? The people who they're trying to ban from teaching this research. So that is counterproductive. If we want to do a better job, we have to make sure that those people remain employed. But it is very much the job of the individual to say that this is my education and it is up to me. The community is a profound source of education, and all they have to do is believe them. They just have to believe the community. And to the extent that they refuse to, either because their family brought them up to not value those voices or whatever reason, that is ultimately on the student. One thing I say as a debate educator is I've watched a long history of debates, and I almost never see a debate end with someone saying, well, you've shown me the better ways, I'm going to change my mind. It's just so rare that it happens. We have to come to the realization ourselves over time that we're wrong, and we have to decide to change our own behavior. And as a community, you can have an influence there. You can stand up and show solidarity. You can confront and articulate what we know to be a kind of hate speech and an attack as such. And you can, give platforms to folks who need to be validated. Those are all ways that you can help educate, but whose job is it? It is half the teacher's job and half the student's job to do that work.
So since this is kind of an informational and educational show, I'm going to keep peppering you both with questions. Because I think there's this idea of there's the stereotypical immigrant. And when you think of what this is, anybody listening right now, I'm pretty sure has an idea of what an immigrant looks like when they think about it. And I'm curious that, like, what is the actual definition of an immigrant? What does it even mean to be an illegal immigrant? I mean, in the US, where not everybody, obviously, there were people here. Most have, you go back enough generations, you probably are from somewhere else, unless you're indigenous, which that's a whole different story. And obviously that would be not an immigrant. Though what is an immigrant? Who are like, what constitutes being an immigrant? What constitutes being an illegal immigrant? I wonder what's going on in the minds of people who think, oh, like illegal immigrant, when a lot of times people either do have their green card, or maybe they're working on it, or maybe they have ties to another country and they're here because they do have family here. And so, like, what is an immigrant? What makes them illegal? And I know I'm asking for a lot with this, but, like, why would people be upset about people immigrating to different parts of the world?
Just a lot of good questions there. I like, personally, when it comes to immigrants and what makes a legal or illegal immigrant, from my understanding, it's a question of legality at this point in time. And that law has been written based on politics, frankly. When we look at immigration laws, one thing I know based on the research I've done is that we don't really see immigration laws coming in time with immigration. Trump's big, like, rhetoric of, like, the immigrants are coming was coming at a, like, downturn of immigration. Like, we see it used as a weapon, and those laws have teeth, but it doesn't track with, like, historic moments. People say, like, immigrants are responsible for all of this violent crime, but the research does not bear that out. You are far more illegal if you don't use your turning signal than someone who's overstayed their visa or something. The consequences of failing to use your turning signal statistically are quite a bit higher than someone overstaying their visa in terms of what's an illegal act that can lead to disaster. But we don't look at someone as being illegal if they don't use their turning signal. And that shows that this term really has less to do with legality and more to do with just policing that white supremacist agenda that I'm talking about. And again, we see that borne out in the research. When you look at illegal immigrant as a legal definition, it has very banal use and very limited use. But when you see it in the public lexicon associated with things like crime and disease and all of these other things, that is a very well-studied kind of dog whistling that targeted Italian populations at one point, and then World War II stopped doing that and started targeting other populations. And some populations will never be able to avoid that cudgel, regardless of the fact of whether they were here first and the line just crossed them.
Yeah, I also think that it's been also a tool, as I say, that when people justify so many things that are happening, inhuman things that are happening, even criminal things that are happening, like just separating children from parents and then make them disappear, the term illegal becomes that type of shield. I believe people, it's kind of shielded by this term to say maybe because they crossed it that way, the border, they deserve all this. And it's, again, a lack of responsibility of people to discuss what is happening in the politics these times.
And one note that I make when we come to, like, imagining what an immigrant is, Brenda's right. The misinformation is overwhelming and completely counter-informative. The fact of the matter is, if you're an economist, immigrants are great. If you're an agriculture worker, immigrants are obviously essential. We all know that immigrant workers are essential workers when it comes to things like food. And you know, famously, like right now, China wishes they had our immigrant problem. Like other countries wish they had this so-called immigrant problem. Like it's not a problem. It is literally the thing that the Statue of Liberty is begging for as part of the kind of settler narrative of what makes the United States a place for everyone to come and settle. And I think that, you know, that the legacy of settler colonialism there is a complex one and a conflicting one. But the one history that we know is from top to bottom. Who gets targeted with illegal immigrants? My wife is from Canada. She has never been called an illegal immigrant, not once. And it's just, she just doesn't look like one. And that's the difference.
There is a big difference because for us, it set us in a gray space where everything can happen to us because people feel that we are in the illegality and we are also related to crime, so that we kind of deserve the type of punishment that is happening, or so many other things. So it is it really is something that needs to be studied more or discussed more, because I think this should be not only in the academia, it should be everywhere. It should be a public discussion on what we are doing with these terms, with the people, with each other, like the social relations we are developing in the middle of a sanctuary garden being attacked, or other crimes. Anyways, I think it's dangerous to set us in a gray area of protection of our human rights. That's what I wanted to say too.
The research is overwhelming that immigrants are by far safer than natural born citizens. Immigrants, especially ones that are undocumented, have far more to lose from being illegal. So doing illegal activities. So they are way more likely to use their turning signal. They're way more likely to, you know, follow those little tiny laws that will avoid any possible encounter with the police. And again, if you just add up the numbers, that means that they're just safer. They're just a much safer population. And Michelle Alexander wrote The New Jim Crow. And in that book, she talks about the prison label and how associating whole populations with criminality has a deep, deep legacy with policing in this country. And the citizen police officer, the so-called militia person, has a role to play.
So I feel like this is something I've read about, but it's also, it would be similar to like a broken windows theory, if maybe a little different, but if you tell somebody when they're growing up that they are not part of a community, that they are already doomed for prison or doomed for a terrible life, they often will follow that path because may as well, because it closes off their mind to the other possibilities of what they're capable of, because they already feel pigeonholed. And I feel like there have been studies on this. I cannot quote them. You're very good at quoting all of those, though it's kind of like the multi-generational prison, you know, like if either parent goes to prison, it's some percentage more likely that their children are going to go as well. And it's kind of scary to see that. Somebody from the Peanut Gallery has messaged me, a listener, and said, Erin seems very hung up on white supremacy. And like, and they said that they're white and also a child of an immigrant family. So, and I think the gist is what makes a tall white person, such as say me, you know, or this particular person, who's also an immigrant, like what makes that immigrant different than any other immigrant? And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, Erin, with your partner is from Canada and does not get the same reactions. I feel my mom is from a different country, but I also feel I can walk through the world feeling rather safe. I can walk through Oakland, you know, and feel, you know, normal, usual city protections will be taking place, and that's more being a female than anything that I feel that way, though that's not because I'm an immigrant or my mom's an immigrant at all. And so I'm not sure how, like, what to respond to this person who's like, wow, Erin seems hung up on white supremacy. And I'm like, but is that not what this is?
I am hung up on white supremacy, absolutely. And it's because I believe the history, and it's because I care about my neighbors, and it's because I believe the vocabularies of the people themselves on their own podcasts and their own radio stations and their own material that they are putting out, that you can find if you listen and if you pay attention. They're among us. They have been here a long time. Again, the Confederacy did not just evaporate. A whole lot of Confederates came to the Pacific Northwest, in fact, because Sherman burnt a swath from Georgia to the ocean and they had nowhere else to go. And so, like Idaho, Washington, Montana, definitely so-called state of Jefferson, you have a huge immigrant boon here with this legacy. And I think that, like, how are we accountable? Again, there's a lot of ways. You can be an explicit white supremacist, which is the kind of person that waves the flag and says, I think this is how it works. Thankfully, I think that that's a very small percentage. But there are too many people that will be like, what does this have to do with anything? Why are we even talking about it? Why are we getting so hung up on it? Maybe it's something else. Prove to me that this is racism, even though all of the research says it is. We will talk in circles around it, as opposed to ever calling it what it is. And here again, I just really want to echo when Brenda Perez went to the city council, like, they get told sorry. The police are like, we're sorry, we're sorry, we're sorry. And that doesn't do anyone any good. And saying sorry is nice, but it's not enough. And if these were characterized as attacks, if we understood the legacies, if we believed the research, if we characterized them as attacks, if we named them as attacks, that kind of action it takes a big step in the right direction and just kind of motivating the population to see the problem. So I think we should all be pretty hung up on it because it's among us, and it's a violent rhetoric. Again, the one thing the last thing I'll say on this, I don't know a lot of pacifist white supremacists. Like, I am a pacifist, and I know a lot of pacifist progressives. I've met a ton of them. Not all progressives are pacifists, but a lot of them are. I have not yet met one pacifist white supremacist, not one.
So interesting take to end this segment on. We'll be right back after a quick break. This is Thursday Night Talk. Welcome back to Thursday Night Talk. I'm your local host, Talvi Freed. I'm here with Brenda Perez, CEO of Centro Del Pueblo, as well as Dr. Erin Donaldson, communications lecturer at Cal Poly. We are discussing anti-immigrant actions that have been occurring in Humboldt County. And when we left the last break, Erin, you had mentioned Brenda's going to Arcata City Council and asking the Arcata Police Department, why aren't you helping us? And Brenda, it seems like you've just heard a lot of apologies and not a lot of action. So what is needed for Centro Del Pueblo to feel safe at this point? Because you said there's a lot of families that no longer want to go to the garden, which is just sad. I think being outdoors and getting your hands dirty is so important. It's such a wonderful way to know where your food comes from, to have the ability, to grow, your own sustenance. It's such an important thing for people of all ages to learn, and that we have the opportunity here in Humboldt County and particularly Arcata is incredible. So what would make the families come back to the garden and feel safe? Is it police action, or is it the community coming together?
Yeah, I believe there is a need of proactivity, as we said at the very beginning, public policy in place to implement a sanctuary city ordinance should be in the priority, in the #1 of their agenda actions. As I suggest them, you have here, you are the house of Cal Poly Humboldt, you have the minds working on these topics. Why you don't prepare public forums? Why you don't bring that out to the streets? Why you don't, why you just don't listen to the people? They should be more able to build public policy in terms of what safety means beyond the police presence, a prevention program, a prevention planning. We discussed about multilingualism. We believe that the sign was targeted so many times because it has the Sulaluk, the indigenous language from the Huillo tribe, then Spanish, English, and an indigenous language from Oaxaca. It's been targeted because of that. It's hard to see a welcome sign in so many different languages. It's hard to see us representing something that is being consistent for receiving people from all backgrounds. It is a space where we can speak Spanish or other languages. So if this space is targeted, people in the city council and police needs to wonder why and start building from there. Start questioning the social order. Why all these tags? Why is that we discuss the white supremacy? It's because we are being so attacked, violently, like repelled. And the message is clear that you don't belong here. And our message is we do. And we are going to transform the social landscape because we do it anyway with our only presence. But now we're going to do it with an intention, which is really change change this disorder, I will say. This any order is just this unbalanced way to think of the human relationships. And we are tired of it. And for sure, I know for so many people, it's been so hard to migrate to the United States. And our only hope is that we transform the space for make it a better place for all of us.
So someone said that, I love the messages I'm getting today. I mean, it's only 2 people, but hey, that they are willing to stand guard at the garden for you, which I mean, I think that's an interesting statement that, which good. I'm glad that there's community members being like, we'll stand guard, though I'm like, I'd love to stand guard, though I'm so busy, and that's not the issue. The issue isn't are people watching, it's the issue is that there are people doing this. And they shouldn't be violating another's space or property. It's property that belongs to the people, though it's like that's a violation of sanctity. Though I did want to ask, can anyone go to these gardens? Because I have a feeling that a lot of people are like, wait, I want to see this. Erin, you had mentioned in our personal comment section that like it's a really beautiful garden. Can everyone go and just check it out?
Everybody is welcome to the Sanctuary Garden. It has a schedule in the kiosk of information. It has some guidelines that refer to the feeling we have to the space, but everybody is welcome. There is no border in the garden, and that's why we don't want to interrupt the atmosphere with overvigilance or policing. Although we recognize it's extraordinary right now that we are in a break point where we were attacked twice in a week. We have some cameras, some technology, again, really against what we want to create there, but being also mindful of we need some, we kind of need these people to think twice before they attack. And I don't know, it's also a self-protection for our groups, for our organizers, for the people that is there. out there very present.
Be respectful at any community space, but definitely this one, when you go, I feel like more foot traffic, especially sympathetic foot traffic, these people are gonna get caught. It's only a matter of time. I do think it's one or two people, and I do think it's a matter of time before they get caught. But just to emphasize what I said in the chat, it looks amazing. It smells amazing. It's an incredible place. It's right next to the ballpark there in Arcata. It is definitely worth checking out if you haven't. It's worth it.
And
Thank
note from
you.
production, they like your idea, Erin, of the more foot traffic, the better. You know, the more people that are there sharing and enjoying the space, then the more likely that person's going to get caught if they do try it, or it's just going to deter them from that. Though I feel like there was a lot of anger towards the Arcata Police Department. So I just wanted to ask, like, what would have been the perfect response from them?
That's a hard question because, well, first it would be nice if they will communicate more. From the first attack to the number 12, we never had a sequence of what they were doing, maybe a report of their investigation, checking on us, like nothing. There wasn't that type of sequence or following up that we were expecting. The perfect answer from the police would be, look, this is what we are doing, just that touch of detail, but they haven't shared that part, and I don't know, I feel discouraged about that, but at the same time, I don't know, I really in a critic position where my community is asking me for more protection, for having the responsibles held accountable. And then we are going to keep the trust to the formal institutions until they prove opposite. For 1 month, we've been safe, no hate crimes. The place is becoming center of nonprofits, meetings like the NAACP that is coming. The Women's International League for Peace and Freedom has come to join us there, to have their meetings out there. The garden is open from 10 to 5 for everyone that wants just to check the plants. And some of these plants come from the south, and some of these plants are edible. As a part of the community support, we receive donations, and we are putting those donations to create a meditation area among the trees, and a dance area, traditional dance area, so that our people feel that they can come back and be safe. The best answer is an action. Again, we are tired of only words, and these words that seems to be also a joke, like the stories become, I don't know, cynic to me. So many times repeated, it seems to be just empty of meaning, void words. A void message is coming from there. So I need more actions, proactivity, more following up, more investigation, or at least being more transparent with that investigation.
Well said. I feel a lot of dealings with the PD often comes down to what they do after incident reports are done and just getting back to people. I do wonder if they were contacted for their, especially because this is Arcata PD that is in charge of policing what's going on out there. There's the what do they call it, the ambassador program that they have now. And I wonder if maybe, tell the ambassadors to go out to the garden and walk around and be a presence out there. It's, and also I feel like this isn't just an APD thing. This is a lot of different policing groups that have that I've encountered or have experienced, it's the getting back to people about what's happening that can become so upsetting, because even if they are doing work, the lack of transparency for the work that they're doing can be very disconcerting. Because I'd love to believe that everybody is actually doing work, though showing it would really help assuage public opinion on that. Just showing what work they're doing. So we are now going into our round robin. This is where each of the panelists get to discuss whatever they want. You can talk about your favorite recipes from the garden if you really want to. Though it's a time to for you to talk about whatever you want listeners to take away, and you each have about 2-3 minutes, and you can discuss whatever you'd like our listeners or those watching on YouTube to take away from this. So let's start off with Brenda.
Thank you for having us. I want really this voice to be representative of so many voices that are there feeling afraid. We made a call to action to the community, not only to the authorities. We want you to meet your neighbor, to really be engaged with them, with your neighborhood. Like, I can't believe people from next door don't know each other, don't know what you do. This is a practice we have in the South. We really develop these networks of solidarity, of being a community. And I want to encourage this in Arcata to protect the garden. There is no better technology, in my opinion, than us, a person, a human, coming back to that. Recognize your privilege is a constant call for Centro. Like, really, people that is listening and thinking, what does that have something to do with my life? Just take a look on the privilege you can help. We all have one, but some of the privilege are oppressive to others, and we need to declare that. We need to be open to say it, be courageous to say it. The call to action for the community also was to share the space. We have the sanctuary garden in the corner of 11th and F Street open to everyone that want to know us, that want to know our work, that want to maybe practice Spanish for a little bit or learn Spanish even. We want you to feel proud of your actions, and that those actions become a result of a better place for us and for the next generations. Be engaged with that. This is not only for Arcata, but for entire county. For our representatives, please listen what people is asking, because there is a time where action needs to be done, and we know people support us out there. So listen to this call, to this pledge. Thank you for having us, Ariel. And thank you, Dr. Donaldson, for everything you say.
Thank you, Brenda. Aaron?
It's been a real treat, Brenda. I really appreciate it. And I just want to follow up with what Brenda said. I think that when it comes to understanding the problem, we have to know our history and we have to know our privilege. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote a dissenting opinion on the affirmative action case that's just exceptional, where she talks about how 7 generations ago we were living under the legacies of enslavement, and 6 and 5 generations ago we were living under the legacies of marauders known as the Ku Klux Klan trying to enforce a war that they lost. And 4 and 3 generations ago it was called Jim Crow. And 2 generations ago it turned into this fragile, prove it to me, I'm sick of this, I don't want to talk about it, it's not a real problem. We need to know that history. It does not go away. We are on stolen land in a country built on the legacies of enslavement, and there are consequences to that legacy. And when it comes to knowing our privilege, if you're a white person, if you get grumpy when you hear these conversations, just know that's a clue that's predictable, and that we could do better. We could stop getting grumpy and start listening. We could open our eyes, care about our neighbors, and know this affects absolutely everybody.
Thank you, Erin. Well, thank you to you both. I'm going to give your credentials again for everybody just tuning in. Today, we were talking about the anti-immigrant actions that have been occurring in Arcata. I want to thank you so much, Brenda Perez. You are the CEO of Centro Del Pueblo, and thank you for sharing all of the information about what's going on in the garden, as well as your perspective on how we can be a healthier community. And thank you so much to Dr. Erin Donaldson. I think you're winning the award for most times on this program.
I love being here. Thank you.
I love that you are here. It's all the time that we have for today. Thank you for being on the show. We'll be back next week. If you have topics or suggestions for the show, you can email us at kzzh@accesshumboldt.net. And just a reminder, the show replays on Friday evening at 8 p.m. right here on KZZH 96.7 FM. You can also watch the show on Access Humboldt's YouTube channel, and I believe we play throughout the weekend on Channel 12, Access Humboldt's TV station. So if you want to see our shiny, happy faces, or serious faces, as this was a rather serious topic today, come check us out, search for us on the internets, or just keep tuning in to 96.7. I'm still your local host, but I'll be back next week with a whole new topic and a whole new panel. All right, cheers. Have a good rest of your weekend.